Great. I'll be speaking about marketing during and post COVID-19. So disclaimer, I don't have the solutions for everyone. I'll be sharing principles and examples, and hopefully we can have a conversation as we move ahead. So let me start off with something called the Stockdale Paradox. General James Stockdale survived 7.5 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam in the 1960s. Unfortunately, he was tortured regularly, and during this traumatic time, he noticed that the optimists who pinned their hope on being released by a certain date would tend to give up and die. Sometime after he was released, Stockdale was interviewed by Jim Collins for Good to Great, as you know, the famous book. When asked about his time in prison, Stockdale replied with this profound answer. There's a very important lesson. You must never confuse the faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. So personally, as Warren, I believe that leaders must be honest with both themselves and their organizations about what is on the horizon, as per the theme of this entire conference. They shouldn't pin their hopes on things returning to normal, as that's an unknown. We must also be pragmatic about what we can do to advance our organizations while still being hopeful that they'll fulfill their mandate. So there's no one-size-fits-all model to adapt to a pandemic. It's the first time many of us have experienced this in our lifetime. And some organizations have been able to respond swiftly. Some are still making adjustments. Some, unfortunately, have closed. Some are still trying to navigate these new waters we find ourselves in. And I believe that we need to reinforce the brands we've built to this date and leverage relationships as much as possible. So this is not merely a marketing shift, but your brand and marketing efforts must complement your organizational directive. So what do we do at Lifebrand? We help build brands making a positive impact in the world. We do this by rebranding and creating brands. And then we develop all the touch points that brands need to communicate, from logo development to website to campaigns, which I'll touch on. Content creation, this is one of our specialities. So we actually help organizations extract and develop content and manage that content on their behalf. Video production, which may include mini documentaries, overview videos, fundraising videos, or videos about a particular day, event, awareness, and multimedia campaigns. So I think what is unique to Lifebrand is we've been able to fuse what I personally have learned in the advertising world for a decade with what I have learned in the nonprofit space for more than half a decade, and create these campaigns which are centered around a theme. We develop all the advertising needed, from television, radio ads to out of home, which are your in-transit or billboards, etc., digital and social media, and all of that is integrated. We often leverage the context that we have in order to solicit pro bono advertising, and we've run possibly about 15 campaigns. One of the biggest is our Blisses for Bread that we do for Peninsula School Feeding Association. And last year we were able to get them more than 15 million rands worth of pro bono advertising. Well, these are some of the clients that we've worked on over the last 6 years or so. They couldn't all fit on the screen, otherwise they'll end up looking like little dots, but I'll just share a randomly selected few. And then before I get into marketing, let me speak about a brand, because often I think it's confused with branded items like pull-up banners, etc. So brand is a discipline is more than just your visual identity, your name, your graphic design, slogan used by an organization. It's actually a set of psychological constructs or impressions that exist in the minds of your stakeholders. So think of your brand as occupying a small little space in somebody's mind, and your brand needs to reinforce that impression and build on that impression and stay true to its promises, so that becomes a positive impression and hopefully shared by your stakeholders as well. It includes your design, your culture of your organization, the language you use, to the way your phone is answered and the color of your building, I believe. Brand management is the working out or the managing of these psychological associations. So how it lives in the world. So when Lifebrand creates or revamps a brand from scratch, we leave our clients with two very important documents. These are the brand manual, which often is referred to a corporate identities guidelines document, but I believe a brand manual is so much more. It reinforces who you are as to the very lifeblood of your organization. And it includes a very important subsection called the brand blueprint. And the brand blueprint comprises of your purpose statement, which I'll touch on later, leave a little cliffhanger there, your positioning statement, which refers to the place that your brand occupies in the minds of consumers and how it's distinguished from that of its competitors, as well as where it operates. So it's a statement that is uniquely yours, and by reading it, it's different. You're differentiated to everyone else within your immediate space. I like to refer to collaborators as opposed to competitors, like in the corporate world. It reinforces your mission, your vision, your values, but it also touches on the tone of voice that your brand embodies and expresses. And if you think of a good example of tone of voice, I would think Nando's as a good sort of written and visual tone. BMW, they're distinct in terms of the voice that is used. You can almost picture the person behind that voice. Your personality, which is a set of human characteristics attributed to your organization. An easy way to remember that is just your brand personified. So if you would describe your brand as a person, who would this person be? What would they wear? How would they deal with people, speak, respond, interact? Your brand archetype, which is a character classification. You get about 8 core brand archetypes and subsections within that as well. Very interesting field. Your essence, which is a driving force behind your brand. Your brand mantra, which is a short phrase, 5 words maximum, that encapsulates the entire positioning platform. Your competitive frame of reference, the points of difference, points of parity, and everything else about your brand in one thought, as well as a few other things that you'll have to email me about. Just kidding. Okay. So one of the most important principles in brand or brand management is coherency. So once your brand is established and it truly reflects the future vision of your organization, it's important that everyone understands that and it's known throughout. And before I speak about the elevator pitch, I'll touch on internal communication. So internal marketing is actually a massive movement, and it's very important to reinforce your brand. And that just means that you communicate internally, and it's mainly to your staff before you communicate externally to your donors, to even your beneficiaries, government, civil society, etc. And a good example of this is what Starbucks did in their early years. So instead of investing heavily in advertising, they actually invested in creating a company culture. They created a language that they would call the different types of drinks, different names like Frappuccino. So they actually started something new and fresh. And then they concentrated on customer service, giving you a personalized, wonderful experience when you went into a Starbucks. So the first person would ask you what your name is as you walked in, and they had a system that within seconds, all the staff behind the counter knew your name would be on your cup, people would be calling you by name, and word of this spread so fast, and it created so much positive publicity that that they became extremely popular. And at one point they were opening a few stores every week. Your elevator pitch. So I know it's a slightly cliched sort of phrase, but I think it's got massive relevance. And I think within this sort of current climate, a lot of stakeholders, if you may call it that, if it's not a too impersonal term, would ask like, so what's happening with your organization? How are you responding? And it's important that everyone, as again, sings off the same hymn sheet. Everyone from the CEO to the delivery person understands what to say within 20 seconds, the amount of time that an elevator takes from ground floor to the 20th floor. Then your purpose statement. This is highly important. And your purpose statement is externally focused, unlike the mission statement, which is internally focused. And it's your company's accountability to the world. And as mentioned, its place is within your brand blueprint, but it's something that I think you can even put up in the walls within your organization. Simon Sinek, author of the brilliant book, Start With Why, famously said, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you an excellent example by a socially conscious clothing brand called Patagonia. Their purpose statement is build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environment crisis. Sorry, that was a bit all over the place. I'll read it again. Patagonia's purpose statement is build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to environment crisis. So why does Patagonia exist? They believe that business practice can have a positive impact on the environment. And what do? They sell jackets. So it's almost like the product becomes the afterthought, which was the main driving force usually when it's just like push product and price and advertise en masse. Consumers are more interested in the heart behind organizations, and it's actually becoming very important and pertinent within the business sector. And this is the space that you serve. And businesses are sort of moving towards this sort of softer, human-centered, triple bottom line approach. And that's where those businesses may need your organization to complement their purpose statements. So by not only looking at your sort of trilog document as to which organizations are giving to which causes, trying to align organizations' values to your values, their purpose statement to your purpose statement, and finding that synergy and approaching those clients and saying, hey, you know, we have a similar directive over here, and we can almost be your foot soldiers and complement what you're doing and help you with the social side of things, as opposed to you changing your direction completely. We can take that on for you and cause have a bigger sort of impact. So a bit of a commercial break. I was wondering if there's anyone that would like to share what their purpose statement is, if you have established that, or if you perhaps have jotted something down now, what do you think your purpose statement is? You're on mute, Michelle. Michelle, you're on mute. You might want to start again.
Sorry, I did press something. I was just going to say, if anybody wants to share, they might want to put a thumbs up in the reactions or type in the chat and we can share with us. Carl Grazer, do you want to share with us? Let's go ahead.
Yes, hi. Yeah, just I'm with Living Hope, NPO in Capri, down southern suburbs, Cape Town. Yeah, our vision statement or purpose statement is bringing hope, breaking despair.
No, the takers.
Nope.
Okay, let's carry on.
I think everybody's too shy. You have to give some time to warm up.
So this is not necessarily marketing related, but I thought it's a good starting point. It's in an article that I was reading recently. I just saw these 3 steps to surviving and thriving in a crisis, and it sort of follows the same principles that General Stockdale was reinforcing, as to accepting the magnitude of the current reality, but also having a plan for the future. So step 1 is survival, and I think that, you know, this probably would have happened earlier on within your sort of planning when things were shut down, but it's about consolidating and about looking at, you know, what do we have, what can we do within this time now. Step 2, adjusting to the midterm reality, so being open to change and partnerships and communicating this effectively. I know for some organizations, your hands are tied. You can't just change your sort of directive completely. So I'm not using a one-size-fits-all model. These are just more principles that I'm mentioning. And step 3, adjust to the long-term reality. And we'll go a bit deeper into these phrases. Okay, so brand management in a pandemic. Yet again, stay true to your brand DNA. So understand who you are as a brand first, and perhaps if you want that brand manual and brand blueprint framework from me, I can give that to you. But maintain your brand integrity. So who you are as an organization doesn't change. Your values, the culture that you've built up, your relationships. However, the current message of your organization's direction during the pandemic, if any, may change. Still maintain the rules set out within your brand blueprint or communication guidelines. And communicate this through whatever sort of outlets or through whatever bodies you need to communicate them through. So look at what CANS did when they became a sort of unified, mobilized voice almost for a collection of efforts. Remember that you don't have to necessarily communicate with polished and highly sort of branded material during this time. If the first step is about survival, and you need to constantly communicate to your stakeholders as to what you're doing, even if you're not doing anything, you still have to communicate sort of what your stance is. Use whatever means that you can in order to communicate that. So if it means Facebook Live, then so be it. But I think remaining silent is dangerous. using low-tech options available. So I'll give you an example of what my wife did. So she's a lecturer at UCT, and for about 20% of the students' marks, they needed to do something called an OSCE. So it's a practical exam, role play, if you may. And they couldn't come into the university, and a lot of them are scattered throughout South Africa. Some are even overseas. So they decided to use WhatsApp video, or WhatsApp as a medium, and then sending videos of these students doing role play at home. So using their family members as different role players, and playing out a scenario, and someone will record them as to what their questions are, their response is, and they would send that back for marking. And it was actually a very obvious solution. I mean, if you think of another example of something similar, is when I think it was America developed a zero gravity pen that would work in space, whereas Russia used a pencil. So think of ways in order to keep your communication going, to keep connected to your stakeholders and your beneficiaries. Then it's not business as usual. So remember to empathize with everyone that is within your stakeholder group. So whether it be donors or corporates that may have been affected by the pandemic as well. They too need to be treated like people that are going through tough times and suffering, and this may adversely affect donations. But if one of the key mandates is about partnerships and relationships, then instead of trying to solicit those short-term goals, step 3 of managing a crisis is the long-term approach. So being able to secure funding long-term, or delay funding for certain projects, or however you want to do it, but realize that they might not be able to give during this time. For some forward-thinking brands, and this goes across the board, corporate to nonprofit, they couldn't necessarily operate as per normal, and they had to adapt very quickly. And some actually did that while still maintaining a sort of an income model. So I'll run through a couple of examples of that with you. So Anglo Ashanti stepped up their humanitarian efforts, and they partnered with a whole bunch of organizations that they developed PPE for, and personally delivered that. Old Mutual pledged 50 million Rand towards COVID-19 response. Vodacom and Discovery created a partnership where they gave free COVID-19 online doctor consultations to all South Africans. Pink Drive took their cancer screening buses and converted those into COVID testing stations. And Nedbank increased their efforts in terms of alleviating hunger and providing emergency relief. The H18 Foundation, an NPO that upskills unemployed women in Cape Town, they generally teach women how to use crochet and sell a variety of products. During lockdown, they began to produce material face masks, which allowed them to stay open with an essential services permit and provided a source of income for their employees. They even went one step further and started providing food parcels to communities in need. During lockdown, Book Iboni partnered with local businesses in Soweto and began a bicycle delivery service around Johannesburg. And they, obviously a book literature-based organization. And this was a very innovative and strategic move from them. Say Yes, during lockdown, altered their face-to-face mentorship program to remote mentoring using video phone sessions. And they also viewed this time as an opportunity to expand their business and reach out to mentors and mentees outside of Cape Town. So in a way, the pandemic actually accelerated one of their sort of growth model programs and allowed them to expand and grow as well. So again, into action time, commercial break. Would anyone like to share what they have done as an organization or any other great examples that they've heard of? Feel free to put it in the chat box, as Michelle mentioned, or flag, and Michelle will spot you because I can't see everyone, and you can share with us.
Faiza, you're clapping for us. Do you want to share? You need to just take your mic off.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes, please. I just wanted to say that we're an organization that provides therapy for babies within the first 1,000 days of life. So it's quite a hands-on, work that we do. And so when the lockdown happened, we really went into survival mode. And I mean, I didn't have a term for it. The term only came today. But the first thing was to make contact with all our families that we serve. And we realized that they all have, except one family, all of them had access to WhatsApp. And we soon used that medium to stay in contact with them. And so many months later, I think we are quite pleased that we have been able to maintain contact. And they've also used this video option of sending us videos of what their babies are doing. They send it to us. The therapists then have a look at these videos. We then send them video clippings using dolls or babies on how what they can do with their kids at home. So in all of these months, our therapeutic input has carried on in a different way. And so I think today's presentation has just put what we've just instinctively done, because we were in survival mode, into nice categories of the phases we went through. But it really was just a matter of sitting together and saying, guys, we have to carry on what we're doing because we can't lose contact with our families. So thanks for the presentation. It was really nice to just hear it from another perspective as well. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Faiza. I know, Carl, you had a thumbs up as well. Do you want to share?
Yes, at Living Hope, what they started doing during COVID is trained up 130 street leaders, so-called street leaders in Masiphumelele. So all the streets in the area have their own leaders, and they trained them on, I don't know if you guys have heard about Wonder Bag, but it's like a bean bag with polystyrene, and you can cook a pot of food. As soon as the food starts boiling, you put it in the Wonder Bag and it carries on cooking for another 2 hours, and it stays hot for another number of hours afterwards. So they trained up these ladies to go back into their streets and go and cook for their communities, which is then not only seen as a handout, but the community leaders are all involved.
Oh, thanks so much, Carl. There's a couple of things that have come through in the chat. Somebody said we moved all our training onto Zoom, and we also started distributing food relief, for which we receive funding from international donors. We were able to use our established networks to reach those in need. Ilham says, we focus on early childhood development and could not continue serving our beneficiaries. It's a big one with the children, those people who work with children. However, because we provide nutritional meals to preschools, we could distribute food parcels in the homes of the children. That's great. Vuyani receives Add Hope funding for our children's home, and during lockdown, Add Hope asked organizations to hand out food bags supplied by them to families. So Vuyani, with the support of churches and other organizations, were able to hand out 1,300 food bags in Graaff-Reinet at a time when it was really needed. That's marvelous. Marty says they moved all our training online and help learners with data to enable them to connect online. These are marvelous stories. I want to just add from an organization that I work with, does drama in the schools. And so they've started recording their productions into video and doing productions at the food queues where people are standing to get food they've been putting on presentations for the kids. We've had, Faiza says we had to add extra what we usually do in the adding data. And I think that's been a big one as well, to be able to people to connect, to supply data to them. Cool, Warren, I think that's
going to just add one.
Yes, go ahead.
Michelle. So there were a number of things we did just before lockdown. When we heard about it, we got, let me put the video on. We got all the leaders in the community together and formed this Nsika team and set up a WhatsApp group, and each with their own WhatsApp groups below that to make sure. So it was all the church leaders, everything. They hadn't actually got together beforehand. And so we set up a system where all the issues could be kind of rolled upwards. So we set that up, and we had masks, same thing. The whole masks, our sewing group making that. We've got a lady in a wheelchair, and she had a team doing those. And also our gardens with seedlings. So we had a whole lot of seedlings. So our rising stars, our orphans who are school leavers, they started working in the gardens and earning some income because they'd lost all their incomes. They had no ways. And now we've got those still getting food parcels, now working in the gardens as part of getting the food parcels to kind of ensure that it's not ongoing handouts. Got groups with our kids at school, so we gave them materials, but also set up like with our matrics WhatsApp groups where we had teachers from private schools answering their questions, giving them websites to go to, etc., giving them data. Yeah, so there were a whole lot of layering that happened, but so it was good opportunity in many ways.
People have been very creative.
Mandy, so a lot of what you've mentioned is more sort of platforms that you've used in order to keep your operations going and be innovative and mobilize community. How have you been able to leverage that from a publicity and a marketing perspective, or communicating that to your donors?
Well, we're expanding at the moment as an organization, so it was great just getting that out on social media. Someone who was going to do a video for us beforehand suddenly had nothing to do and said, can we do some videos for you for free? So they actually did videos of those little things we did. We were able to publicize that. A big thing was, sorry, that was my phone. A big thing, we were actually over Mandela Day. We did a big thing on honoring people, and that really got out because people had done so many handouts. So this was quite a different initiative we did, where it was saying to people, let's honor each other. Let's so that was something we did. But yeah, in terms of marketing, I think it was really about people seeing a different way of giving. There's so much handout driven stuff out there, and we really wanted to put across a way of honoring of what we call two-way giving. Yes. Yeah, which was all about honoring everyone involved, not just handouts.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I think we must never everyone has a different perspective as to the level that you showcase your work, and I think you must always do it in a tactful way that respects the dignities of beneficiaries, but I think it's also important in order, with permission, to actually, firstly empathize with those beneficiaries, and in a way that is unique to your organization's mandate and tone of voice, to capture that pain, because your beneficiaries overseas don't necessarily know the magnitude of the difficulty that some of these communities are facing. So what we often do with the videos that we create is we do these sort of initial shots where at a distance, we'll show the harsh reality, but then within a sort of storytelling framework, we show that there is hope if we mobilize our resources and we shield wall together and through our consolidated efforts make a difference. So I think that's important, and I think if people could even write down their personal accounts, which could be shared in a text version in a mail newsletter, MailChimp newsletter, whatever platform you use. I think we need to encapsulate the strife of what the pandemic has caused in a way that is unique to your brand. So sorry if I repeated myself there, but I wanted to emphasize that point. Great. So this little icon just depicts nurturing. So brand management and sort of nurturing one's brand should be a constant process that happens over time. So then when calamity actually hits, you know who you are as an organization, you've worked on your culture in order to be able to work together to achieve certain mandates, and you have built your relationships with your stakeholders so that when direction has to change slightly, there's enough of a sort of a rapport and an understanding with everyone that supports you in order to take them on that journey with you. So it's not a time to withdraw, in my opinion, but to forge deeper relationships with everyone that our organizations touch. And as mentioned earlier on, keep communicating with your stakeholders. And then this notion of partnerships. So as mentioned earlier, if brands are social constructs, your for-profit brands have realized that they have a much bigger role to play in society, and they're being held to account. I think there's even an obligation from these organizations to actually have a social mandate, and not only the organizations making 50 million rand or more that have to give 1%. I think organizations are being held to account across the board. When you find those matches where your organization's offering can complement a corporate, and you create that relationship, I just want to warn you about greenwashing, or a term I've just come up with, COVID washing, whereas don't allow an organization that's possibly powerful and needs to get their message across to take over the branding, and so that your organization is an afterthought. So maintain your brand integrity, get your piece of the pie in terms of being showcased as a partner through the organization's PR team and through any other media that goes out there. Corporate brands are playing in your space now. So I think you have a lot to share, and you are the experts at dealing with socially orientated matters. So they can definitely learn from you. So just two more examples that just come to mind in terms of great partnerships. Nando's turned some of their restaurants into kitchens that fed the poor, and they partnered with some nonprofits and communities, which they obviously got some press from, but I definitely think that even though profit is the main driver, I think that organizations realize that we need to work together in order to overcome. Breadline Africa is an awesome organization. So they do infrastructure with containers, and mainly libraries within schools and communities. And they realized that they can't operate as per normal during the lockdown. They already had forged a relationship with Peninsula School Feeding Association, but they accelerated that even more, and they actually raised funds in order to provide food parcels for communities in need. And they've had one of the most successful years ever in terms of fundraising. Marion, if you're listening and I'm making a mistake, just stop me and correct me. But Peninsula School Feeding Association as well, they've been given a platform to speak at many different fundraising conferences of late, because they've been able to raise almost their yearly budget in addition to what they normally raise. So they've been able to raise over, I don't know what the final figure is, but I definitely think it's over 12 million Rand extra just during those first 3 months of lockdown. And yes, they were in an optimum position because they do school feeding, but still doesn't negate the fact that a lot of work had to go into communicating with stakeholders, letting them know the extent of the need out there, and mobilizing the funds in order to meet the need and to actually help more people during this time. So communicating post-pandemic. So I'm not a futurist, and my crystal ball broke last week, but the question is, when does this truly end? So this virus is moving through the world and affecting different markets in unique ways. We don't know how it will really affect Africa in the long term, whereas in some westernized countries, they're actually moving on from it. What I can say is build on your personalized connection that you have started on. So the human experience over generic messaging, bots and automation. If it needs the entire team to take turns as to responding to Facebook Messenger alerts, and that turns into a conversation, the investment, and it's worth taking those platforms seriously. When someone reaches out to you, I think you really need to look at ways in order to build on that relationship. Content is key. So it's in a brand's best interest to see their audience less as a user and more as a human, shifting perspectives to empathy when sharing your messages and creating stories around your offering. Then even more of a shift towards digital communication, so improving your digital channels, making it easy to give, and then getting your AdWords in order. So I don't know if you have applied for the Google grant yet to get your $10,000 of free AdWords per month. You might even want to go check out Discovery Ads, which is a new platform which is far more user-friendly than AdWords, and allows you to sort of optimize your search efforts through video and through banner advertising, and see how you can facilitate giving across many regions. Are your digital platforms responsive and SEO rich? Double check your website for yourself. When it comes to marketing, it's not only a good presence that's going to be a necessity. People are most likely going to judge you based on your online brand perception. So do a brand audit. You can even just get 5 external people to give you an honest depiction of all of your branding, from your business card to your Facebook cover photos, to the messages that you're putting out there. Ask them, what is it that we're telling the world? Get neutral organization, neutral people and persons in order to give you constructive criticism. When we, before we develop a brand or revamp a brand, we go into a process called immersion. So we immerse ourselves into the world of the organizations that we deal with. And then we come up with a survey and we ask key questions. And organizations often learn so much from each other and from some of their other trusted stakeholders through this process, that it reinforces who they are, their culture. It finds gaps as to which sections or which departments within the organization lack information, or they only know about their program perhaps, and they need to learn more. Again, internal marketing comes back into play. As corporates become more responsible, partner with them. I've mentioned this before, but try and find out what their strategic mandate is, what their vision and values and their purpose statement is, and find matches and contact them based on that, and have a conversation or have a game plan as to what you're going to offer them beforehand. And often you can become an extension of what they're doing within a social space. And then plan for the future. So it's worthwhile writing up something called a PR disaster management plan. Companies often have this, especially if you have a brand ambassador. So if this person ends up doing something really untoward and compromises the entire relationship, how do you approach it? How do you approach your stakeholders? None of us were prepared for the magnitude of this current situation, but let's have a plan in place for the future, and let's think of ways and means and workshops that we can put into place to respond, to look at examples of what other organizations have done, both locally and globally, and communicate constantly, coherently, and build your future-proof brand.